Changing the healthcare industry is a lofty goal for a family doctor, but Tony Dale is doing just that. His company, the Karis Group, handles medical bill negotiations for over 1 million people. His passion is taking his Christian faith and actively applying these truths to the medical economic world. His new company, Sedera Health, is taking principles learned from Christian healthcare sharing co-ops and applying them to secular businesses, revolutionizing the way that companies offer healthcare to their employees.
Today I'm picking up my good friend Tony Dale. Tony's from England, so I had to pick up my friend Jimbo's 2006 Jaguar XJ Supercharged V8 Portfolio Edition. The Portfolio Edition is one of 140 like it that were made, but this car, while we're driving in the front seat today, was really meant to be driven around by your chauffeur while you sit in the lap of luxury in the back seat. The carpets have lamb's wool. There's tray tables that fold down so you can set your bubbly on it. And the center console controls everything up here in the front so that you can tell Cadbury what happens on the radio and the climate control with the push of a button. You can't drive this car without feeling fancy, so I had to class it up a little bit today. I'm not a fan of tea, but I feel like I have to have some today while I'm driving this thing around. Crumpets, anyone? Tony, we've gotten to know each other over the last probably 8 or 9 years at some capacity. So one of the things I think is most interesting about you, the move from England to Austin, Texas. So I got to start with that story.
Well, we've been blessed with an amazing life. When I say we, obviously, I mean my wife and I. We came over to Texas in late October of 1987. The weekend before we were due to fly, we were there, you know, as part of the church that we belonged to at that time. And someone shared, rather as I've described before, that they felt like there was something God had put on their hearts for us to be aware of. In what they shared, they said there are going to be some major storms in your life, and it's going to take a long time before you understand why you're there. We arrive in the States with, you know, our 4 kids and 12 of the biggest boxes that the airline will allow us to put on, you know, so we're moving everything we can because we know we're going to be there for a while. We assumed we would be pioneering this work among doctors. We just fell flat on our face. I mean, year after year, we got nowhere. You know, we had some difficult years. I did everything from selling in flea markets to door to, you know, trying to get any job I could, but nobody would hire, you know, a doctor with my sort of background, you know, who's overqualified for sort of anything except medical work.
So talk to me about the transition from like traveling door-to-door salesman and all the other odd jobs to what you're doing now. How did that get started?
Well, by the end of the 9 years I just described, we were so sort of unclear what we were supposed to be and really frustrated and confused. We just sort of agreed together, Felicity and I, that we were giving God an ultimatum, that either he sorted out with real clarity what we were here for, or we were going back to England. Well, some very interesting things happened. I injured myself playing basketball with the kids. Needed very simple knee surgery. The surgeon told me it was going to cost a couple of $1,000s. Everything went great until the bills started coming. But I was so ignorant about the way the American medical system worked, I didn't realize that I'd still get bills from the hospital. You know, the anesthetist, you name it, everybody who could figure out an excuse for billing us.
Sure, yeah.
And $14,500 later, this is 1996, so in today, 2018 terms, that's about $35,000. And I was a part of one of these large Christian cooperative groups that have sprung up, and I just intensely dislike the idea of my bills having to be shared by my Christian brothers and sisters, at an outrageous rate.
Yeah.
So I called the hospital, called the surgeon, called the labs, the MRIs, everybody, and basically said, I'm essentially a cash payer, and this seems completely inappropriate.
Yeah.
And to my amazement, everybody just folded.
Wow.
And that was the germination of the idea that has led to the Karis group subsequently, and then 4 years ago to Sedera as well. I could have never imagined that that would lead to helping with billions of dollars of medical bills for people, and coming to where we are now, actually trying to change the whole way that healthcare is paid for. Medical pricing has to be dug into to be believed, because seeing it, you won't believe it. It's unbelievable. When you dig into it, you begin to find out how much is wrong with the system and why we really have to tackle the system right at its core in all sorts of ways, so that we can bring rationality in an economic sense, and to be honest, so that we can recreate the doctor-patient relationship, which is extremely important to me. I'm finding out is important to the vast majority of doctors as they begin to understand what's going wrong in the American healthcare system.
So we're chatting about the formation of the second company you started here, Sadirah. Tell me more about what that's up to right now.
Sadirah looks at these things, and we say there's a completely different way of handling that. We're not inserting ourselves in between the patient and the doctor, or the patient and the medical provider, the facility, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
What we do is we facilitate how that money can move from A to B. In a sense, we've got a sophisticated but different crowdfunding way of looking at what's going on with no promises, but with phenomenal results. The background that we touched a bit on the drive here was my experience of working with the Christian Healthcare Sharing Ministries, and they were doing a remarkably good job at about half the price that was going on in the insurance world. Now, there are reasons. It's not exactly comparing apples to apples, but I'm very impressed with what I see going on in those ministries. And so I really wanted to figure out how to bring that methodology, the whole idea of sharing. Could a similar concept, which is very close to what the Christian Sharing Ministries are doing, work where people on a large scale, or companies on a large scale, recognize that there would be ways to cooperatively share, but on a voluntary basis. So if we're serious about tackling medical costs, one of the things we have to start thinking about is we do not have a health system. We have a sickness system, and the system itself has become sick and encourages sickness.
Yeah.
Instead, we need a health system that drives people towards health.
Yeah.
Very different story.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's all about sticking Band-Aids on things when they happen. So tell me about that shift from sickness-based healthcare to healthy living-based healthcare.
From the physician end, which of course I'm very interested in with my background, there's a movement across the country gaining speed at a remarkable rate called direct primary care. These are membership-based family doctor practices where the doctor, instead of needing to look after, say, 3,000 patients, maybe looks after 500.
Yeah.
But they charge them on a membership basis. Now, Sadirah is at the other end of the spectrum. If we can bring the consumer and the provider together again on the basis of cash, it makes a huge difference. So, I mean, right here in Austin, you can pay $3,000 for an MRI, or you can pay $350 or $400. And the difference is not the quality of the service you're given, but who is controlling the whole of the payment structure.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, we need to bring that rationalization in. So the providers and patients coming together with cash being king,
Yeah.
does a huge amount to move towards real transparency.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay, on the flip side of that, you've got to look at the role of the insurance companies. Now, insurance as a concept is fantastic. We insure against catastrophic events
Right.
that are unlikely to happen. But that's not what health insurance is anymore. In fact, many of us feel that health insurance isn't insurance. And it's become an extremely expensive way of prepaying for an event that we know will happen.
Anytime, even in the midst of the turmoil of what people are feeling around our healthcare system currently, on both sides of the aisle, there's still an adverseness to change that so many people sort of feel when it comes to something that's so big. Tell me about some of the struggle of trying to grow something that's so foreign to people.
I think part of the role of the entrepreneur is to see things that don't exist and to begin to redefine what's possible. And the truth is, when you start looking, there's normally a way to do something. You really have to do whatever it takes.
Yep.
There's actually a very interesting verse in the book of Proverbs in the Bible that says, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. And I would say that if you dare think, you dare believe, then you can make it happen.
That's at the heart of anyone who feels the true burden and joy of entrepreneurship. When you're starting Sadirah and you're in that place of, I think this could work, but I'm going to have to throw in years of our time, $1 million into R&D to even find out if this is going to work. Talk to me about your mindset.
You know, I don't know if I would have had the courage if I had known how difficult it was going to be. Maybe that's somewhere where my natural stubbornness really came to my rescue. If something's worth doing, then it's worth the pain and the effort and the cost, and that's just part of the price tag. Price tag. Price tag. Price tag. And what one learns as you move into the investing side of the journey is ideas are literally a dime a dozen. You know, if you talk to a VC firm, they're seeing 3, 4, 5, 10 ideas a week, a day maybe.
Yeah.
And they're trying to sort through not so much the idea, although of course that's critical. They're really looking at the character of the entrepreneur. And I do think that's critical. I would certainly encourage those who are watching what you're producing from the entrepreneur side to be saying, if I'm not willing to give everything that I've got, why on earth would I ask anyone else to give anything, let alone everything? If your next meal depends on whether you're delivering anything, then you're going to do everything you know how. There'll be no 9-to-5 mentality about that. The entrepreneur's journey is not an easy one, but it's incredibly valuable. I've always, right from the start of any businesses I've been involved in starting, been looking for people who are better than me. Don't be defensive. Don't worry that they know how to do it better. Love that.
Yeah.
Because when you bring people who are better on board quickly, that frees you to do what you're honestly good at, which may be having the ideas, being willing to take the risk.
When I'm reading, there's a combination of both ideas that are sparked, formation that happens in me, and creativity. You know, and so it's not necessarily they talked about this specific tactic that I could put into practice, but the story of how they put that thing into practice sparked some sort of imagination in myself. That reading a book, that spending time in a conversation with someone who you respect and admire and grows you in countless ways.
Yeah, Jordan, I love the way you put that it, you know, other people's ideas and approaches spark the creativity. You know, coming from the perspective I do, I think that creativity is something that God puts inside each of us if we'll learn how to nurture and grow it.
Yeah.
At least in essence, something of that spark is there inside each one of us, but we can cultivate it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the important thing. You know, you mentioned that, you know, an idea here jots a thought over here. We all know that, honestly, there's nothing new under the sun.
Right.
You know, with all the billions of people out there, someone has thought about this, but usually only one or two people have said, then I'm going to try to do it.
Absolutely. So I'm always interested in the constant dreaming that we're doing as entrepreneurs. What has you dreaming these days?
Sadirah obviously is taking the bulk of my time at the moment, and it's just in the earliest stages of the classic sort of business going up the hockey stick. So the next year or two, I would say, are really critical to what we do. Because many businesses fail when they're growing the fastest. I'd estimate that we're growing at about 10% a month at the moment.
Wow.
And
most companies would be thrilled at that in a year.
Absolutely. And so when you compound that on a monthly basis, that has a huge impact on where you are from the beginning to an end of a year. And the sort of advanced planning, I mean, anything from facilities to IT to staffing.
As the company grows at such a rapid pace, it sounds like a full-time job just recruiting and hiring people to manage all this. What does that side of things look like? Holding on to the core DNA as you're having to hire people on a never-ending basis to be able to keep up the kind of the service that you provide.
You know, that really is a great question. And especially when there's strong service elements of what we do. I think it comes back that in your hiring, you need a clear view of what you're trying to accomplish. The first person I hired him to become the CEO. So we're a tiny startup. It's me with my ideas.
Yeah.
And into those ideas, I basically said, I need someone who's going to be a better CEO than I am. But finding someone who understands this niche world, you know, it's going to take them some time to learn it. So I looked for someone who had the humility to work under my leadership, but the ambition and the smarts that I had confidence right from the start that within the first 4 years I'd be ready to hand over to him as the CEO. And in fact, I handed over at the end of 3 years because he was doing such a great job. And man, I've never regretted that. You know, Jamie Lagarde came with an impeccable background. He let go of his own sort of company, what he was running as a startup, because he felt this was a bigger idea. And he wanted to put his life into a bigger idea. Someone who'll let go of what they've got because they believe you have a bigger idea to which they want to attach themselves.
Yeah.
That sort of vision and drive. And you know, I would say...
And the humility you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely am not of the persuasion that the role of the CEO or even of a company generally is to promote shareholder value exclusively. I think that's an incredibly narrow way of looking at things. And I think there's strong evidence in the sort of economic world that actually companies like ours that are really clear on their social and values purpose, they do really well economically, and that you end up giving a much better return to your investors.
You're so passionate about your work. It's a call on your life that doesn't end at a certain age.
Maybe a couple of thoughts that I would leave with the aspiring entrepreneur. Don't ever forget that your family comes first. Absolutely, we have to learn how to do the hard work. You know, sometimes you do whatever it takes, but not all the time. And if you're not clear that family comes first, then you will end up putting them second or third. I would say make sure that your wife is the most important person in your life. And the way that most wives identify love is time. So have time. Make sure there's time in the busiest of times built in for your wife. Secondly, I just emphasize love your team. Build them up. That company is nothing without that team. You cannot do it all on your own. So anything you can do to give credit where credit is due will come back to bless you.
Wise words, friends.